Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. I'm Stu Hardy, joined as always by Derek Brissett. Derek, it's been another 2 weeks. We've had 1 week of Six Nations rugby and another week off to marinate, but there's also been, the Rugby Europe Championship, and that seems to be heading into its intense final few rounds. There's been Premiership Women's Rugby. There's been, preseason MLR fixtures. There's still rugby going on, even if it's not the biggest tournament in the world that isn't the World Cup. So what have you been watching?
Man, I don't know. Just trying to watch what I can. The Premiership women's rugby is always fun. Sophie de Goode's obviously been absolutely dominating that competition. For the Saracens, which is lovely to see. A lot of great Canadian performances coming out of that league right now. Obviously de Goode's back in Canada for a big event that we will get on to later in the show, but so that's kind of been fun. To be honest, I didn't really get too much of a chance to check out a ton of rugby over the last weekend, anyways. Got doing a little bit of work for my Australian rules football team, the Toronto Dingoes. That took up a bit of time on the weekend. So I didn't get. I'm still trying to catch up on some like the URC and stuff that happened over the past week, but I don't know. Maybe I can lean on you a little bit here, Stu. What should I be made aware of? What happened? What are your big thoughts over the past couple weeks of rugby in the world?
Well, as you know, it hasn't been the easiest time for Welsh teams recently. They put on a pretty good performance in the first half against England before sadly conceding, I believe it was like 11 points in the second half and losing that game. They are currently 0 for 2. They're out of contention to win the Six Nations and they're up against Ireland this coming weekend. So you know that if you beat the three other teams in the home nations, you win the Triple Crown. I feel like if you lose to the other three teams
Hmm.
in the home nations, you win the Triple Frown. And
Oh,
this
triple
is that.
frown. There we go.
Yeah.
We gonna try to make that catch on there?
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Triple
Uh,
frown.
moving in, speaking of
Wales might be a
frowns,
quintuple frown by the end of this tournament, man.
that's the wooden spoon. Whole
Wooden
different
spoon.
name.
Yeah, that's true.
Although considering the number of losing bonus points they've been getting, maybe it should be the wooden knife or something. I don't know. But speaking of triple frowns, if we move to the URC recently, it has not been good viewing. Cardiff, Scarlets, Dragons all lost their games, but one Welsh team was able to pull it through with Dan Edwards scoring a drop goal in the 79th minute and 59th second to get the win for the Ospreys as they beat Ulster. Full score, Ospreys 19, Ulster 17. So
Wow.
yeah, very
Good for
intense.
you, man. Yeah,
Yeah, lots of
Ospreys
stuff going on.
finally
It's
coming through for you.
yeah, lots of stuff. There are 5 wins on the bounce now,
Nice.
and this is their best winning run since 2016 or 17, I think. And when they went, I think like 8 games with out conceding, and yeah, so good things happening at the Swansea.com stadium for the time being with uh
It's a rare thing, man. You should enjoy it. Like
I
soak
know,
it
I
in.
know. I'm taking in this strange optimism that's coming around at the moment. I don't know what to do with it. It's not normal for me to be in these like positive
Maybe
situations.
now more teams will wear just a giant logo as a kit.
Maybe,
Maybe that's
maybe.
what it is. Maybe that's what you've been missing the whole time is just a gigantic logo, like
Yeah, well,
cartoonish size logo on your jersey.
yeah, well, it's Yage branding out there somehow. Anyway, let's move away from the European and South African competition over to North America. And because, this is a Canadian rugby podcast, let's talk about Rugby Canada because we'll start off by saying that has been announced over the past week that the Canadian Rugby Players Association and Rugby Canada have announced a new collective agreement for the next 3 years. Now, try as we might, we haven't found any information of what the collective agreement includes. Neither Rugby Canada nor the Players Association have published that. But From the press release provided by Rugby Canada, it seemed to be positive on all fronts. It may even be a continuation of the previous player association collective agreement.
Yeah.
But we'll try and find out more about
Well,
that.
I mean, I'm not really surprised that Rugby Canada would obviously make their own press release that would be a positive, tone
Yeah.
to it. But I mean, like in general, though, like it's something that, as we kind of discussed, similar to like the MLR and stuff, it's like it seems like it's really a thing that is needed. And I think like, more collaboration, if I recall correctly, like more collaboration between the players and like the executive level of Rugby Canada was something that was highlighted in that high performance review too.
Hmm.
So it does seem like however these discussions did go down, I hope the players are happy with it. I hope Rugby Canada themselves are happy with it. Should be a mutually beneficial thing, hopefully.
Hmm.
But, it's good to see that, at least some progress is being made and working towards, building that relationship between the players and like, the Rugby Canada executives and the board members. Cause,
Yeah.
that's something that's making sure everybody's on the same page is something that Rugby Canada does really need.
Hmm.
So, like it seems like it's a good thing that's happened. And hopefully, when however long it actually is going to take when the MLR gets around to making their collective bargaining agreement with the players too, it'll be something that the players can be happy about and can are everybody kind of mutually agrees that it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, something we know for certain is the location of one of the matches for the Pacific Four series
Hmm.
in this year. So the New Zealand versus Canada game, which will take place on May 19th, that will be held at the Apollo Project Stadium. Now, for those of you who are fans of Super Rugby Pacific, that is the home of the Crusaders. And this graphic that the Black Ferns release showed that they are hosting all of their games. So the game against Canada, the game against the USA,
Yeah,
and the game against Australia. So the question now comes up is, does that make New Zealand the hosts of this year's version of the series?
so
Because, yeah, I mean, by all indications, it should be.
is every
But
game in New Zealand?
every no, because the USA Canada game, that's in the United States.
Okay. Yeah.
And that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
You share
USA
the
versus
border,
Canada.
and it's the
Yeah.
easy. It's definitely easier to get to uh, Infinity Park than it is to get to Apollo Project Stadium, or any
Yeah.
stadium in New Zealand. But I've been wondering what will hosting the Pacific Four series look like in the future. Now, obviously, the first version of the series that was hosted in the United States, but that was 2021. We're still in the midst of the pandemic and social distancing. And, it was just the two rounds, only featuring the two teams of the United States and Canada. Then we had the series in 2022, and that was hosted in New Zealand, but that was also building as preparation for hosting for the World Cup. Then last year in 23, we had Canada hosting um, four games, but their game against the United States took place in Spain.
Yeah.
And
That
they
was
had,
weird. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like the week previous, the USA had played Spain and Canada had played South Africa, and from a fan perspective, yes, more games, fantastic. I'm not complaining about that. From a logistic planning perspective, we can admit that was weird, right?
Canada versus USA in Spain randomly. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a little weird. I don't know. Like, I feel like we're just kind of it's weird because it's like professional women's rugby, seems like it's really just taken off for like the first time in like the last like 3 to 4 years, right?
yeah.
As far as like, there's obviously the pro leagues starting to turn up in Europe and the Sophie de Goody's whole like speech about like more resources, more games. We always talk
Mhm.
about it in a Canadian point perspective and from a Canadian point of view, which obviously we will obviously do that Canadian rugby podcast. But I feel like a lot of other countries could also probably listen to exactly what she said and be like, yeah, like that's how we need to grow professional women's rugby in our country
Hmm.
too. Right. And I don't know, like I feel like New Zealand seems to be hosting a lot of big professional women's tournaments.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe right now it's just a matter of, I mean, just speculating really, but like maybe it's just a matter of like they're the union that's got the resources, the
Mm.
time and the in order to actually put on these tournaments right now.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that can eventually grow out and you can start doing it in like, maybe we can get some more games and stuff in other places or, because like get more Rugby Canada women's games like on Canadian soil or if they're going to
Yeah.
play the US at the very least on North American soil. And,
Mm.
same for Team USA and, right, like same for like any of them, really. Like, I mean, obviously the women's Six Nations is a pretty big deal. But
Yeah.
for everybody else that's outside of that, which is obviously New Zealand, New Zealand, Canada, and the USA for one, right? It's
Mm.
like you do need kind of a tournament to do it. And I mean, um, to be honest with you, it's like, selling women's rugby in New Zealand is probably a little bit easier than selling women's rugby maybe in Canada or the United States as far as, trying to make a little
Mm.
bit of money and stuff off of it if you can.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, like, I mean, one of the big stories in Canada right now is the PWHL. And it's like, it's 2024 and we just got our first professional women's hockey league in
Mm.
Canada.
Yeah.
Like, national sport, it's taken us to 2024 to get one pro women's hockey league going. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's a little, which is, I mean, shocking and unfortunate, but glad to see that that league is doing pretty well. But
Yeah.
maybe it's kind of just the same thing. It's like go to New Zealand because that's where we can host it and make it worth the while for all the unions and stuff involved, even if it
Mm.
does involve a bit of travel for Canada and
Yeah.
USA. I don't know. That's
Well,
just a
that was
theory,
my
though.
so my and what I would say for like hosting going forward. Let's say, for example, 2025, and because let's say that New Zealand are hosting this year, 2025, the USA is hosting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just like
and
like
yeah,
rotate it
and
through the four
so
countries.
yeah, so what I'm thinking you can do for that, and let's say for like this next cycle, so for 2025 to 2028,
Yeah.
because that'll be you say like, okay, so USA, they get to host all the games um next year, with the exception of Australia versus New Zealand, because
Oh, okay.
logistically
Do that one.
so as
Yeah.
in that weekend, maybe like the Friday night, it's like
Yeah.
Australia, New Zealand, and then the Saturday, it's USA,
Mhm.
Canada. And then the following weekend, it'll
Yeah.
be, the other rounds and then the third final round. And then you can say,
Yeah.
okay, 2026, it's Australia, but this time USA and Canada is held in Canada, for example. And
Yeah.
it may be a case of nations do like, if you don't alternate hosting, so or well, I don't think you would be able to alternate hosting. It would just end up being like doubles. So for example, in that case, USA would host Canada in 2025, then Canada would host that one game in
Yeah.
26, but then in 27 Canada's hosting, so they host that game again, and then uh 28, it then goes back to the USA. So, but in the same sense of in the strategic plan that Canada wants to do, and it wants to have like this improved relationship with the United States, and we're having more of these test matches with our nearest neighbor. I think it's perfectly reasonable to also be like, okay, we'll have this game, and that'll be hosted. So let's say 2025, USA hosts Canada for the Pacific Four series, but that summer, Canada hosts the USA. And then
Yeah.
the following year, it's the same thing but reversed. And then when we have a more established women's global calendar, we can then say, okay, we know we're going to be bringing in X thousand fans to come watch these games in New Zealand. New Zealand will then host all the games for those 3 rounds, and then the following year it's like the USA can host all these games for these rounds, and then go from there. That's just me spitballing of
Yeah.
see because it from my view it's like if you can establish the calendar and get that down as early as
Yeah.
possible, you can then work out other tests you want to have. So you can then have Canada versus Spain or South Africa at a certain point of the year, but you need to have those other dates for the Pacific Four Series,
Mhm.
for WXV, established prior to doing any supplemental games. That makes sense?
Yeah, like I mean, I don't really mind all the games obviously being kind of in one country. I mean, I'm sure as the tournament grows, like we'll be able to lock down more like hosting and stuff. But I think as with anything, it's just going to come down to like money and what unions are kind of able to do it because you got to host like three other unions for 3 or 4 weeks maybe like in order
Mm.
to play out this tournament too. Right. So I don't know. To be honest, it's like I'm just kind of excited that they have like a competition that we can kind of look forward to on a yearly basis. Even if, as some people have pointed out, it's at a bit of a weird time of the year, in regards to the European club playoffs and stuff. But,
Yeah.
um, it's, I think like we did a tournament and stuff, and it's like, I think if you really wanted to break it down, there's probably areas where this tournament can improve on. Um,
Mm.
and hopefully it will as the years go on. But for right now, I'm just all the games in New Zealand, or most of the games in New Zealand, and wake up bright and early to watch them all as we've been doing for the past couple of years, anyways.
Yeah, that whole having the 2022 Pacific Four Series and the Women's World Cup in New
Yeah,
Zealand really got us prepared for these
New Zealand,
early
like I
morning
mean,
kickoffs.
the New Zealand Union is seems like they're going pretty hard on women's rugby and bringing
Yeah, good for them.
competitions to New Zealand, right? So, I mean, that's a good thing, obviously, but it seems like the Six Nations have always kind of been like their own little thing.
Yeah.
And it's like when, on the women's game, it's maybe doesn't have as many countries as the men's game does, right? Or so it's like if you got the Six Nations are gonna stay in their little rugby clique that they kind of have, then
Mm.
like I mean, in all honesty, like the next best four countries are Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the USA, which
Mm.
geographically aren't exactly close to each other.
Yeah.
Unless you want to meet in the middle and have a game in like Hawaii or something. But um, yeah, I mean, yeah, actually, now that I said that, it's not a bad
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Now you've put it into the ether. That's like actually
yeah, Hawaii,
that could probably work out.
yeah, we've
But
tried that a
yeah,
couple times in the past. We've had a few Hawaii discussions on this podcast, but
yeah,
I don't know, like
yeah. This is a
it's a
future
little
question
weird because
to
it's
be
such a
answered.
big geographical difference, but they are like outside of the Six Nations, they're the four best teams,
Yeah,
right? So it's like, and I mean, like they're better than a lot of the teams in the Six Nations, all four of them, but like
yeah,
it is what it is, right? So you gotta,
yeah,
I don't know, they'll make it work. They're making it work now. They'll continue to make it work
yeah,
in the future.
yeah.
They'll
Well,
see what
that's the thing.
works,
Is
tweak it, keep going.
we're at the initial stages of professionalism for women's rugby on a global level, and it's going to be a few teething problems here and there, but that you just got to stick through it and work to make it better for next generation to come. Anyway, something else that we should mention is that World Rugby have announced the referees for the Women's Six Nations and the Pacific Four Series. And it was
Yeah.
announced that Canadian Julianne Zussman has been appointed to referee the New Zealand versus USA game in the Pacific Four Series, and that will be held on May 11th. Also, Chris Asmus will serve as the TMO for Italy versus England and Ireland versus Italy in the Women's Six Nations, as well as New Zealand versus Australia in the Pacific Four Series. And Shanda Asmus will serve as an assistant ref for the USA versus Canada in the Pacific Four Series. We should also mention we're big fans of Kat Roche, and she will be taking charge of France versus Ireland in the Women's Six Nations. And Joy Neville of Ireland, she will call time on her career, with her final game being France versus Italy in the Women's Six Nations. But speaking of refereeing, World Rugby released a report about the abuse that was distributed on social media during the 2023 Rugby World Cup. And, guys like Squid Rugby have released, well, since they released, have posted certain pages from it, highlighting certain levels of abuse. And it's a bit of a tough read, but obviously it's what people have done. And one of the conclusions that was found was that the referee of the men's World Cup final, Wayne Barnes, was the single most targeted individual throughout the tournament and received a third of all abuse targeted directly at individuals. And like, this is it. Well, certain rugby fans like to say how they're better than other sports because there's a level of respect, there's a level of camaraderie and understanding. This is clearly not the case. Like, the actual graph, it is comical how much the line for the abuse Wayne Barnes got compared to the next highest individual, and that's even further than the next match official that was highlighted for abuse.
Yeah,
And
one French player, one English player, another match official, couple English players, South African players, more match officials
yeah, and
as far as the individuals go.
yeah, and that's it. They don't even name
They
the other
should, they shouldn't. They
individuals.
shouldn't name the other people.
They shouldn't.
They should.
I
They probably shouldn't have
ideally they
even
shouldn't
named
have
Wayne Barnes. We should have just
Wayne
figured
Barnes.
that one out.
Yeah, and they even have a breakdown of the case of how much abuse Wayne Barnes got. Like 49% was general abuse, 24% was match fixing or corruption.
Hmm.
There's 5% racism, 4% sexism, 0.57% Islamophobia, which is weird as it is cruel. Homophobia, 2%. Dog whistle, 3%. Abuse towards his family, that was 3% as well. And it can be very easy for people to say, oh, that's just Johnny Casual and, hiding behind a screen, tweeting what he wants to tweet. They're not a real rugby fan. It's like,
Yeah.
but we've clearly fostered an environment where this is allowed to happen. You can argue that it's within social media, within the rugby community, but we keep hearing stories, such as like the WIU sexism scandal that came out last year. This idea of what rugby wants to present itself as
Yeah.
and what it is are not the same thing. And
No.
it's not up to, saying like, okay, the union needs to sort it out or social media companies need to sort it out when we have some semblance of control and self-control. It is not enough for us to say, sorry, we as a collective need to be better.
Yeah, like obviously, it's one of those things that it's like it is obviously really unfortunate to see, and obviously for Wayne Barnes too, like that's pretty rough. I think there's like I would be very curious to see how like a chart like this compares to like other sports. Because for one, I've never seen another sport release something like this.
Hmm.
To my knowledge, I don't know. Can you think of any leagues, teams, anything that have ever
No,
released something
like,
like this? Like I
I'll be
can't
honest, no, as in I have seen like
like it happens.
speculative reports done by charity groups or
Yeah.
something after like the FIFA World Cup,
Yeah.
and things like that. But it's never been FIFA itself.
Yeah, like so it's like that's the one thing. It's like I am curious to see how this compares to other sports because I think like you said, Stu, like rugby as a sport definitely always has preached like the rugby values
Mm.
and like that whole system and everything. And the whole like even like to the oldest joke in the history of the game, like the hooligans game played by gentlemen, obviously emphasizing like the gentleman part and
Mm.
stuff, right? And putting in all like the respect and stuff. And I think that this is kind of like the problem is like when you do present yourself like that, when you get called out on it, everybody tries to kind of defend it. When you get
Yeah,
called out on the fact that it's kind of nonsense, like people might try to jump to defend it. But I think like what this graph kind of shows, it's like you can be like, yeah, in rugby we respect, because it's on like every MLR broadcast. Like when
yeah,
there's like, the captain has to go talk to the ref and it's like they have like a pleasant, cordial conversation, right? Right. And it's like they have the
mm,
pleasant, cordial conversation. And then it's like, oh, this is what we love about rugby because you can do it. And it's like, I mean, this is what it like this chart just clearly shows that it's like that only really extends to the 15 guys that he has that official has the power to kick out of the game.
mm,
Like, is really like, because it's one of those things I think like it's like where you're going to say like you have to respect the ref, but it's like what this shows, and there's that Rugby Pass documentary, Whistleblowers, that just came out too, that
yeah,
kind of deals with a little bit of the same subject matter, right? And it's like it's pretty clear that it's like the respect the ref thing doesn't translate over to like online, or if you're just a fan at the game, what you can yell like at a ref or whatever at the game. Um and it's just kind of like it does, I think it just kind of shows that like in a weird way, it's like rugby's not that much different than like other sports, really. Like as far as like the treatment of the refs, other than the fact that the refs might be able to be a lot more strict with like, hey, if you talk back on a call, we can actually give you a yellow card or give you a red card or really penalize your team, which doesn't really happen in other sports, right? Like it's, in all honesty, it's like playing hockey and watching hockey. It's not like we always talk about like, the refs, like I said, those conversations that are always like, look how cordial these conversations are. Whereas like in hockey, it'll be like, you can tell a ref to go fuck himself and then he'll tell you to shut the fuck up and sit in the fucking box. Right.
yeah,
And it's like, that's how you have a conversation with the ref in hockey. Right. And that's a normal like hockey conversation. Right. And
mm,
it's probably not a good thing. Right. But hockey also doesn't hide behind like, oh, we have to respect the ref thing. Right. I don't think hockey's ever tried to hide behind respect the ref thing. They took the names off the backs of refs' jerseys at one point in hockey, so you can't yell at them because you don't know what their name is. Because that was actually a problem at one point. Which I think is the other thing too. Like I think in rugby, because we do have that like that respect the refs thing, there is also the refs are like known, it's called like I don't know, like they're known commodities and like players, known personalities, right? Like Wayne Barnes, Nigel Owens, guys like this, like they're all like on social media,
yeah.
right? No refs in any other sport are on social media,
Hmm.
right? Like none. Like do you follow a basketball ref on social media? I highly doubt
No,
you.
no, I do
You
not.
follow a football ref? Follow a
Nope.
soccer ref?
No.
No, but we can follow Wayne Barnes. We follow Nigel Owens. We follow all these other dudes, right? And it's like, and because they're on social media, you can toss in that little like at Wayne Barnes. It's like at Wayne Barnes, you suck at refereeing rugby or whatever people are saying to him, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you can tag them in it, right? You can't tag other refs in anything, right? And they're just kind of like I've been watching hockey like my whole life. I can probably name two refs in the NHL right now, but you can go through as we just did with the ref assignments. We can go through like a whole list of rugby refs because they're
Mm,
kind of out there like that, which probably also impacts things, right? Um,
yeah.
like I said, it's like the abuse is I don't think the abuse is super unfortunate to see, and it's a problem, and we need to stop it. And it's a huge problem, I think, across the board in a lot of sports at like the grassroots level of a lot of sports. Um, where it's like you do need people to be refs,
Yeah.
right? But if you abuse them while they're trying to ref, it's going to make volunteers or like low paid refs that are just trying to like ref a game to get like a community league off, right? Not want to do it. But it also kind of goes through like every player. But I don't know. Like I would be fascinated to see what this looks like in other sports because I
Mm.
feel like it wouldn't be that much different. Which isn't a
Yeah.
defense of it, but it's like an overall like sport fan societal problem that
Yeah.
we view referees, we view athletes, we view coaches, to be honest. And I mean, to add that in, this podcast is probably a little pot calling the kettle black as far as the way we talk about a certain coach on our show, too. But
Yeah.
it's like, you know, when you have like all of this type of like social media and everything, it's like you can talk shit about whoever you want, man. And
Yeah.
that's, it's a societal problem of like the world that we live in now, right? Where it's like if you are an athlete, if you're a ref, if you're a coach, you're on social media, you can get anybody saying anything to you, right?
Yeah.
If you're a celebrity of any kind, you can get anybody saying anything to you, right? Like at any point in time. And it's just I think it's a societal problem, but rugby more than a rugby problem, but rugby's part of that society that we live in. So that's kind of all like that rugby's part of the problem that oversees like all of society because it's just the way we treat athletes on like this is just the way we treat athletes on like
Yeah.
Twitter and stuff. Like how many people called like the 49ers coach like an idiot for like play calls he made in the Super
Yeah.
Bowl online. Like it's everywhere. And it's a problem for everything. So I mean, I know we're maybe a little pot calling the kettle black because some of the stuff we
Yeah.
talk about Rugby Canada on this, but no, I mean, it is genuine. It's definitely a contributing factor. Like whenever I hear players or something listen to our show, I'm kind of like, oh crap, like that's not
Yeah.
like. I mean, I was like, oh well, hope you didn't listen to that certain episode.
Yeah.
Was because you can beat me up, and I do not necessarily want to deal with that consequence.
Yeah, I actually that reminds me of a funny Twitter exchange where one keyboard warrior, let's call him, was
Yeah.
giving a bit of an abuse to an MMA fighter, and the MMA fighter responded and said like, "Oh, you say that behind your keyboard, but not to my face." And he goes, "Absolutely not. You beat the shit out of me." And he goes, "Fair enough."
Yeah, it's like yeah, but that's the thing. It's like
As in that
right, and
barrier, it gives
but that's
people
it's the
the
exact same
idea
thing.
that
It's
they can.
like I mean, however many like every account that tweeted Wayne Barnes that if that person saw Wayne Barnes at like on the street outside the stadium, probably ask him for like a picture or
Yeah,
something, right? Because weirdly, rugby is the one sport that the refs are also have a little bit of celebrity. They're not as anonymous as they are in other sports. And to be honest with you, the referees, like Wayne Barnes, is a phenomenal ref, and we kind of all
yeah.
know him as the best. That's why he got the World Cup final, right?
Hmm.
In most other sports, you probably only really know the names of the bad refs or the refs that everybody wants to say are bad. Like I can
Yeah,
name one MLB umpire. It's Angel Hernandez, who
yeah,
is just worldly known as the worst umpire, and that's all I really know about him.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But it's like that's it. I can't name a
I don't
single
even
other up in
follow
the league.
MLB that well, and even I know who
And you
Angel
know Angel
Hernandez is.
Hernandez because he stinks, right? And
Yeah,
it's like that's part of the whole see, but that's what I mean though.
yeah,
It's such a big like this rugby people may like read this and be like, it's like how it's terrible, but that's because rugby, I think, projects itself to such a higher standard than like
mm,
every other sport, right?
yeah,
But this shows that it's not really different from any other sport, at least as far as the online treatment of the like officials and how fans and how coaches talk about it. The Full Contact documentary, for example, had a scene where the Italian coaching staff came down from the box to yell at a ref.
yeah.
right? Like it's not that much different.
Mm.
It's just that maybe rugby more than any other sport follows pretty strictly that the captain's the only one that can talk to the ref. And if you start swearing at a ref, right, that ref is empowered to give you a pretty harsh penalty, right?
Hmm.
And it's honestly from the sports and a tactical standpoint, it's really not worth it in rugby to yell at a ref. Other
Hmm.
sports don't have that deterrent,
Yeah.
right? But that's the thing. It's like if you how many players do you think would yell at a ref if they were like, you can't give a guy a card for yelling at you? They'd just be bombarded with crap.
I'd say that Dan Bigger's career would have gone a wildly
Would it be?
different
Yeah,
direction.
exactly. Be over. There'd be
Yeah.
fights on the field. It'd
Yeah.
be nuts. But
All right.
I don't know. It's
Okay.
just, I think it's a societal problem. Rugby's part of the society.
Yeah. All
That's
right.
how I'm kind of viewing this, though.
All right. All right. Let's pick ourselves up a bit. Let's move on. Let's look forward to something with positivity. And that moves us on to the Sevens series. And next up is the Vancouver Sevens. And we have the big announcement that Sophie de Goede is temporarily leaving the Saracens and joining up with the Canada Sevens team. Uh, the Rugby Canada's social media posted this before the team announcement, and she is listed in the squad. So, welcome back, Captain. Looking forward to seeing what you can do at Vancouver this
Yeah.
coming weekend. Um, then there's a big story about this other guy coming to the Sevens, Antoine Dupont.
Yeah, he doesn't
Have
matter though
you ever
because
heard of him?
well, it doesn't. I mean, I have, but I mean, he's no
I've
Sophie
heard
de
he's the
Goede.
Sophie de Goede of the
Yeah,
French team. So
yeah, but like
yeah,
not as good though. Apparently, he can't play forward. I hear so not as
yeah,
good. He
yeah.
can't like. I mean,
Well, there's only one Sophie de Goede, so I
exactly.
mean
Yeah. So
everyone's just competing for second place at this point. Um, but yeah, cards on the table. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be a great opportunity for him. Obviously, he's looking to get into that Olympic squad
team, yeah,
and and basically play in France in two major competitions in as many years.
yeah.
Um,
Be a shame
but
if he went medalist in both of those.
yeah, that
Um,
would be a shame
yeah.
indeed.
Sophie de Goede though, like I mean, I don't like it. It's cool to see her like Canada's biggest star playing in
Yeah.
which, which is probably the biggest rugby event in Canada, right? So it's
Mhm.
cool that she's coming back. Um,
Yeah.
I'm still like not sure how beneficial it is to have players constantly jumping back and forth between sevens and 15s. Um,
Yeah.
like
And
like like literally like going from like you played a 15s game like a week ago, you fly on a plane to Vancouver, play a sevens tournament, probably fly back to England, play for the Saracens and 15s again. Um, right? Like I don't, or maybe she'll play in. Is she playing in LA too?
well, they're on like consecutive weekends, so it's more
Yeah.
than likely
So
that they've
maybe
only
yeah.
announced the team list
Yeah.
for Vancouver at
So it's
the
like
moment of
I don't
recording.
know.
So
I've still kind of I think that sevens and 15s is obviously they have very similar skill sets, but strategically they are kind of different games. And
yeah.
I think the best sevens players are often players that kind of just dedicate themselves to
Mm,
sevens. The best
yeah.
15s players are often players that just dedicate themselves to 15s. Um, like I mean, even like at
Mm.
the last Olympics, right, that we had Sonny Bill obviously played for the New Zealand Sevens, and I think he got hurt, right? But he was like
That was in 2016.
that was in 2016. Sorry, did I
Yeah.
go? I went
Yeah.
okay,
And
not far enough back, but it's
yeah,
like I mean, he
the
wasn't
first sevens
that
at the Olympics.
great during that tournament either, or whatever. And then
Yeah.
Fiji, who was like a team of just like these guys are like sevens pros, or the team that
Yeah.
wins
What the
the Olympics.
defending world champions are good
Yeah,
at sevens? Who'd
they
have
are, but it's
thought?
like they have guys that are just like they play sevens,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yeah.
like
Well,
I don't know.
actually, on that topic of speaking of great sevens players,
Yeah,
it was also announced this week that a Canadian sevens player has announced their retirement. That is Bianca Ferreira. and she is a two times Olympian. So she represented Canada at the 2016 and 2020 Olympics. She has also has the most tries scored and the most matches played by a Canadian on women's rugby, on World Rugby's women's seven series.
Yeah.
And she
Second
announced,
second
yeah,
player to ever hit 150 tries too.
yeah, a 12-year career. She posted on Instagram, "The time has officially come. I am proud to announce that my time in the Canadian journey has come to a wonderful end. Now it's time to pass the torch to the ones who will take the sport to even greater heights. To my teammates, thank you for pushing me to the best version of myself. Our shared memories, experiences, and laughs will last me a lifetime. To my family and loved ones, you have been a constant source of strength throughout my athletic career. You've been with me through the most triumphant experiences as well as the most difficult ones. I am forever grateful for you and your unconditional love. And to the fans and ruggers who keep the sport spicy and alive, thank you for loving our sport, loving our team, and being with us every step of the way. Go Canada." And there's a on Rugby Canada, there's a list of her achievements from making her debut with the Canada Women's Sevens team in 2012, which was the same year she was named what is now the U Sports Women's Rugby Rookie of the Year with Concordia University. She scored 11 tries in her inaugural Women's Seven Series, and she go on to become just the second woman, as you said, to reach 150 career tries on the international series.
Hmm.
Um, she was Canada's second highest scorer at the Rio Olympics and secured the bronze medal. She was just one of six Canadian players to have played in two Olympics in sevens. She represented Canada at two Rugby World Cup sevens, winning the silver in 2013 and captained Canada to gold at the 2014 World University Championship. And Freya played in her 44th Sevens series at last year's Canada Sevens, a milestone achievement that at the time saw her tie Australia's Shani Williams for the all-time women record. And Jack Hanratty says the following: Bianca is one of the most well-known faces around Rugby Sevens. Her appearances and try statistics speak for themselves. With numerous World Series accolades and an Olympic medal, it was a career of many firsts. Over the last number of years, Bianca has played a huge role in the Sevens team, developing the team on and off the field. And though we will miss her in our training environment, wish her every continued success. And that's a thought we would like to continue as well. So, Bianca, thank you so much for everything you've done. All the best in retirement. We wish you all the success with whatever comes next.
Yeah, man, it's a hell of a career, and she's one of the best to ever do it. So, hopefully she enjoys retirement. It's gonna be super weird not watching her play this weekend in Canada too. But
Yeah, but time marches on. Speaking of Vancouver and moving somewhat into MLR news, is that the group MLR to YVR has named their team. It's not the Vancouver Highlanders, it's the Vancouver Swans. And they
that'd
have
be
announced they
awkward.
are launching the investor meeting soon. Now, some people have said, why would you give your team a name and then have investors come in? I'm seeing this from like an open
Yeah.
viewpoint, is that you have the name, the name's not a confirmation of anything that's going to happen. You could get different investors come in and they say, well, I want the team to be named this. I'm just saying, if it's Gil and a cocktail, I'd be very
Well,
cautious about it.
that was
Or
gonna be
even
my
the Gil Swans, I wouldn't be 100% on board with that. I'd be like, maybe you should do a bit
Kill
more due
Swan.
diligence.
That was gonna be my
Um,
joke. Was remember when what was it called? Loyals Rugby decided to name their team the LA Guiltinis instead of the
yeah.
Royals, which everybody at one point in time was like, this team's gonna be called the LA Royals.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
yeah, it doesn't
well,
necessarily mean anything.
and and anything that gets more Canadians in
Yeah,
professional competition, we support fully. I will say though, if they do stick with the name Vancouver Swans
yeah.
and then they don't play at Swan Guard Stadium, that is a missed opportunity.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Can do
Like,
every sliding try or every diving try. You can call it a swan dive. We got a lot going on here.
yeah,
It's I mean, it's a good team name if you go with it. I mean, I think it's really hard to go wrong with any like animal based team name because you can pick most animals and it's gonna work. Um, I think like my only issue is this like this is obvious. My only issue is that like this is obviously like the same group that came out like a year-ish ago, probably less than a year
mm,
ago, and was saying it's like they're looking for like a Ryan Reynolds type to like you know
yeah,
pay for the team, and obviously they're stating that they're going to start investor meetings and stuff. Um, and I mean, I think if there's anything that we've learned from the Toronto Arrows, the New York Ironworkers, Rugby ATL, is that you can have a lot of people that want to or are capable of running the actual rugby team, but you also need the guy with the money, right?
yeah,
The guy that has got the deep pockets and stuff. And it's like
yeah,
that's a super crucial thing. And obviously, if they're going to start having investor meetings, that's good,
yeah.
but it also probably means that they don't have the money yet, right? And
No,
it's
but again, it seems as though they have had consultations with
yeah,
whoever and have said,
it's just
look, if you give your team a name, then it makes it
yeah,
more
maybe I don't know.
real. It gives a like it's in the ether essentially. It's
Yeah,
right instead of being like, oh, this is a future Vancouver team in MLR,
yeah,
possibly. Maybe it's like this is our team name. We'll go from there. It's like the
yeah,
first step, I'd say.
yeah. I
But
mean, don't get me.
again, nothing's
Yeah,
ironed in. I will say they have updated their Twitter handle from
yeah, the
MLR to
Vancouver
YVR to
Swans.
Vancouver Swans.
Yeah,
So maybe there is a bit of commitment to this name.
yeah.
But
I don't. I just the
we
only thing
shall
that
see.
yeah, the only thing that makes me like kind of nervous is like I mean I feel like we've just been hearing about an MOR team in Vancouver since the MOR was created,
Yeah,
right?
but
And
and nothing has really come forward
exactly
that's substantial.
right.
Um,
That's my concern though. It's like I feel like Va Vancouver is becoming to MOR what Quebec City is to the NHL,
yeah,
which is just the city that is just constantly talked about as like, well, there's a fan base there. Maybe there's a stadium there.
mm,
It's like you could probably put a team there. We'll play an exhibition game there this year, and then
yeah,
nothing. And then and it's just like the same recycled. And it's like every time you play the exhibition game, it's like, oh, could we put a team here? And then nothing happens
yeah,
ever or
yeah,
whatever. Rest in peace,
yeah.
Quebec Nordiques.
Yeah, well, we shall see, and encourage, as we said, any involvement of Canadians in professional rugby. Speaking of which, the Atlantic Privateers have released their new jerseys for the season.
Yeah,
So
very wavy.
yeah, very wavy indeed. Um, but something that struck me is that these kits are blue, and
Correct.
the Vancouver Highlanders look to be wearing a red kit, which
Correct.
seems to be like the inverse colors that they've played in previously. So, like the Atlantic Selects used to be in red, and now what they're in blue?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, the Atlantic Selects were red. I mean, their logo's still red for
Yeah.
the privateers, but the Highlanders weren't. Are you referring to like the Vancouver Wave? Because I mean, that's two completely different teams.
Yeah, well, to be honest, the Vancouver Highlanders didn't really, they've only just
Yeah,
announced members
yeah,
of their team. They're not obviously remnants of something that existed before, but in the sense
yeah. No,
of that, it just feels
I mean, yeah, that's two.
it feels like strange. They did say in the launch of their new logo that Garrison were their primary sponsor, and that's why the logo has like the red and blue, which is the red and blue from Garrison. Um,
Oh, interesting. That's
so, but obviously, as in like they're
honestly, it's a.
privateers. It's a very nautical theme, so
I
of
was gonna say
course,
Garrison's a
waves
good sponsor brewery name for a team called the Privateers.
exactly.
That's solid. That's
Well, do you
solid
know what
cross
the
marketing
back
there.
sponsor is Admiral
Did you see the one on the arm is Marco,
Marco? Yeah.
which I can't read the rest of it. I assume it's polo, just
Yeah.
just to complete the you go with the nautical sponsor trifecta here.
Yeah. But it's the kit is designed by Paladin, and I guess it's now just a waiting game of seeing if these kits are going to be
They got to be
available for
playing.
the public.
They have to play the Highlanders at this point, right?
Oh
Like
no,
just
I think they
brainless.
are
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
Rugby
They
Players
said they're going to
Challenge
do it. Yeah,
and the Coast to Coast Cup. So
yeah. So
yeah,
I mean,
they've got
they
at
will.
least two games that should be coming up.
It'll. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I like the kits and stuff, and I mean,
yeah,
honestly, it's like, and even like this kind of circle back to the MLR Vancouver thing. It's like I'm enjoying the news of like the privateers and the Highlanders. I think like way more just because it just feels so much more like real. Even if it's
yeah,
not MLR, it's two groups trying to establish like an elite level of rugby within Canada. And I
yeah.
think that's something that should be like celebrated. And it's like it feels a lot more tangible because it's like they're announcing players. They're announcing kits. Hopefully we'll get like a little bit of a fixture list or something soon, right?
Mm,
Players do seem excited about it, right? And I mean, some of the names like the Highlanders are getting, I mean, that we'll get to in a second here, but like, they're getting some pretty big names from the Canadian rugby community to show up for their team too, right? So
yeah.
it's like this all kind of feels like a very positive direction from, for Canadian rugby between these two teams on the complete opposite sides of the country.
Yeah. So back into more MLR news. It was announced by USA Rugby that the MLR Deputy Commissioner, Bill Gorin, has been appointed as the CEO of USA Rugby. Um, honestly, I don't know that much about Bill Gorin, but it seems to be a good match. And yeah, just the continued involvement of MLR personnel with USA Rugby, especially as we look ahead to the 2031 Men's Rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's an interesting development. But let's talk about something a bit more substantial that has a few Canadian players in it, and there are a few pre-season fixtures. There were actually four pre-season fixtures that happened this past week. NOLA versus Dallas is the first one. There has been no information about it whatsoever. We don't know who played. We
Yeah.
don't know what the score was. So we'll just move past it. Um, so the first one we'll actually get into is Utah versus Los Angeles, hosted by Utah. Again, we only really have like the final scores. So Utah 7, LA 34.
Nice.
That's a pretty impressive turnout for the new boys, I'd say. I mean, I
Yeah.
know technically they're the rebranded from Rugby ATL, but we're just treating them as a new entity, really.
Half
Then
their team's
it,
rugby ATL, but yeah, sure, they're new.
yeah. Um, well, different side of the country, different conference, nothing in it. Anyways, now we move on to Chula Vista, where San Diego hosted Chicago. Um, and this one was a bit of a back and forth, but ultimately ended in a tie, 21 all. So
I think the most important note from this game is Matt Giddo looks like Chuck Liddell now. So that's about that was all I really got from this
oh,
game.
oh goodness. And then we move on to Seattle, and they had the first of their two Canadian preseason fixtures up against the Pacific Pride. Interesting. Reed Davis was in the forward pack for Seattle, and a previous Pride player. Um, and now remember, the Seattle is a professional outfit, and the Pacific Pride are high performance athletes, but they're mainly in university setting. Some guys have graduated and are no longer available for the Pride. Some guys have been picked up from the Pride for MLR. So the Pride's experience has diminished since the break, and it really kind of showed in this game. I say that it's
Did it
pretty
show?
close.
Did you see the game, or are you just going off the
I
79-7 score line?
I was just about to like edge in, get to it, keep it even, but yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Seattle won 79. The Pride only scored a converted try. It's
Yeah.
way to ruin the surprise, Derek.
Yeah. So,
Um, but
well,
yeah,
I mean, in my defense,
but yeah,
nobody got to watch it. So,
yeah, that's true. We just got the
yeah.
score updates on Twitter and stuff. Um, but that said, Seattle will play their second game already by the time this comes out because
Yeah.
we are recording on February 20th. They have their second preseason fixture on February 21st, and that is against the Canada Selects. A lot of names in there that are going to be featuring for the Atlantic Privateers, former Arrows players, guys from the Sevens who haven't been selected, and Vancouver Highlanders or future Vancouver Highlanders, I should say. And speaking of which, the Highlanders continue with their signings. Since we last recorded, they have announced 4 names of signings and 2 for the reserve squad, which they said they were going to be announcing every Saturday. So we have 2 names on the reserve squad, which are Keegan Neary and Ben Beauchamp. And for the signings, we have Matt Klimchuk, Peyton Tanaki, Reed Watkins, formerly of Seattle, and Deshaun Bowen, who has decided to join the Highlanders after the unfortunate demise of Toronto. And, it's great to see these guys
Yeah.
continuing their rugby journey. I know I've spoken to some players who have decided that, it's time to basically hang up the boots and not continue rugby, and that's always disheartening. So it's always great when we find out that some guys are still continuing on.
Yeah, like it's obviously, you got Watkins and Bowen too, 2 MLR players, Klimchuk's, been with the national team a bit too. So it's like
Yeah.
you're getting 3 like pretty, elite level players going to the Highlanders, right? Like it's the Highlanders are really, I mean, I don't like, maybe like it seems like they're kind of, there's a few players that seem like they're kind of maybe benefiting from, the unfortunate Arrow situation. Obviously, Bowen being one of them. Right. So there is a couple like former Arrows, former MLR players that are finding their way to the Highlanders, right? So
Mm.
um it bodes well for like obviously, a lot of things. Like it kind of shows that like if guys of this caliber want to sign for the Highlanders, like, even as they're starting up, like it kind of it like the just the roster that they're putting together, like legitimizes them in like, a pretty strong way by being able to put together such an impressive roster. And it's something I'm like, I don't know, I kind of look forward to all their signings now because it's like they're building up a pretty solid team, and it's going to be like I can't wait to see what the schedule actually looks like, who they're actually ending up playing, because it's they're putting together a pretty fun team, so can't wait to watch them.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's, great rugby to look forward to when the Vancouver Highlanders do play. But in the meantime, you can watch the upcoming Vancouver Sevens on rugbypass.tv, and you can watch the Six Nations on DAZN. The Premiership and URC are currently on pause, but then when they return, they will be available on Sportsnet, and you can catch the Premiership Women's Rugby on the Rugby Network. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more episodes as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. You can also find us on Spotify, S4P, and Apple Podcasts. We have our YouTube channel at The Rouge Rugby with episodes of the podcast as well as extra interviews with players and coaches. Make sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell notification, and stay up to date with all our videos. We're available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, all at The Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can the fine people find you?
At Percent the Jet across all social media platforms.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Derek, thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby Podcast, where we focus on real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.